Our look back at Phase 1 of the MCU is coming to a close as we get to Captain America, the first Avenger. I have a funny relationship with this film, as when it initially came out, I thought it was a very blatant, quick, the Avengers is out next year, we have to introduce Captain America. But the more that I've watched the film over the years, the more I've actually come to respect it and really enjoy it a whole lot more. Is Cap's first outing his best film? No, I think most would argue his best comes later on. This movie has a very unique flavour to it that the other Cap films just don't really have. The others have the more grounded, espionage spy feel to them, while this is very much a period piece war film, with, let's face it, some B-grade villains and schemes to boot. This is probably one of the more cartoonish films in the MCU's library, as the plot revolving around Hugo Weaving's Red Skull searching for a magical cube that'll help him rule the world isn't something you'd find out of place in a Saturday morning cartoon or an Indiana Jones film, which is probably the film's biggest inspiration. Plus, this is the movie that got everyone saying, "Hail Hydra." This movie rides a fine line where things almost get a bit too cheesy and hammy, but thankfully the movie does a very good job of setting Steve Rogers up in Brooklyn to make everything feel quite believable and real. So that by the time Steve does become Captain America, we can buy that he's going to be fighting Hydra soldiers with laser guns, which seems like something ripped straight out of Wolfenstein. What I really enjoy about this movie is the time it spends in the 1940s, where we explore Brooklyn and get taken back to the time period. In these moments we get the glossy look we got from the films of the 1940s, which I think was very intentional, especially with scenes featuring Chris Evans and Haley Atwell's Peggy Carter, as a throwback to films like Casablanca. The attention to detail is what really stands out to me, where director Joe Johnston, who directed the original Jumanji and Jurassic Park 3, really helps draw you into the times, with a lot of the cars and outfits all looking spectacular and of the times. There's a lot of time spent replicating the look of 1940s America, especially in the World War II propaganda posters and films, which Captain America is obviously a symbol of, and very much rooted in that image of America. You've got the great song and dance number, and of course throwbacks to the old comic book covers, like Cap punching Hitler. These are moments that just make the film special in its own unique way. Then of course we come to the introduction of Chris Evans as Cap, who I think is wonderful and does everything right in the role. The CG used early on for the skinny pre-serum Steve is still off-putting to me, as the proportions with Chris's head still sticks out to me. But once he becomes Cap and we're seeing his actual proportions, the movie takes off. We get the do-gooder Boy Scout that we're accustomed to, learning to be a hero and sticking to being a good man, which makes him so likable. It helps that Chris has wonderful chemistry with most of his cast too. Haley Atwell shines as Peggy Carter, this wartime bombshell who helped form S.H.I.E.L.D. The two of them have this lovely chemistry where you can see a natural relationship between the two characters form, making their separation even more heartbreaking at the end. If only Thor could have taken notes from this film. We also get the introduction of Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes, who obviously becomes much bigger later on in the Cap films. We get to learn a little bit more about him and his relationship with Cap, but I'd argue we don't really get to dive too much into Bucky here, as this movie is focused much more on Cap's story. The movie does just enough so that when we do get to Bucky's death, it still feels like a loss, even though after all these years the impact of this scene has lessened. Red Skull is a fun villain, and it really comes down to Hugo Weaving's performance in the film. If it was anyone else, I think he would have run the risk of making Red Skull seem too much like a Saturday morning cartoon villain like Skeletor. His story is very much tied to the Tesseract, and surprise surprise he recalls the Norse mythology of Thor's world that reminds us that yes, this film is part of a shared universe. I've always found it kind of bizarre how fast Red Skull is able to manufacture tech from the Tesseract, but I'm sure you could make whatever argument to say he had the resources to pull it off. Toby Jones is also quite entertaining as Arnim Zola, as Red Skull's right-hand man, who does seem a bit less comic booky in this film than he is in Cap 2. I still can't believe though that Tommy Lee Jones actually agreed to be in this film as the Colonel that doesn't believe in Captain America but then eventually gets turned around. Tommy knows exactly what kind of character that he's playing, and it leads to a lot of really fun scenarios where he can be a little bit sarcastic and have some fun in all of this chaos. Stanley Tucci is wonderful in the film, who invents the serum that creates Captain America. While his character is there more to serve his purpose to the hero as the mentor and help as an emotional push, it does make him a bit predictable, as we've seen that scenario played out many times in many other films. Dominic Cooper plays the young, fun version of Howard Stark, Tony Stark's dad, who I'll admit is used quite sparingly here, and almost comes as a reminder that hey, this film is connected to the Iron Man films. And while I do like Dominic Cooper's portrayal as Howard Stark, I do prefer John Slattery's take in Iron Man 2. Oh, and this film is forever going to to be known as the film that wasted Natalie Dormer. I mean, you couldn't have predicted where she'd be in a few years, but still, Natalie Dormer, wasted. The action scenes in this film are fun when they're focused on espionage, Nazi spy chases, or breaking the Howling Commandos out of a POW camp. Once the movie starts involving the soldiers with big laser guns fighting Cap, it can start feeling a little too fantastical and can take you out of the time period a bit, especially when there are scenes involving a lot more CGI and explosions. Looking back, some of these shots don't look as nice as they used to, and the green screen work becomes more noticeable. This film does seem to be one of the more violent MCU films in the library, particularly the final battle in the sky, where Hydra soldiers are falling into propeller blades, which is probably another Indiana Jones callback, but wow, that's a lot of blood. While Cap's films arguably become the strongest films in the MCU lineup, this film really acts as a nice introduction to the character, and really stands on its own as a period piece. It feels suitably different to what we get later, and thus really feels like it has its own unique identity. Alan Silvestri steps in to do the score, which helps the film's score stand out from the previous Phase 1 MCU films for putting in a little bit more effort here. This film does involve a lot more Avengers setup than the previous MCU films, and it can act as a bit of a drawback to the film, as we're bookended by modern day sequences, with Nick Fury popping up to tell Captain America that he's been frozen for 70 years. I do really like the moment though when Cap thinks he's woken up in the 1940s, but it's actually all revealed to be a ruse. But when this film's post-credit scene is actually a trailer for the Avengers, that's when it starts to feel a little bit more obvious. Overall, Captain America: The First Avenger is a really fun film. It's a film that's very easily rewatchable and acts as its own film due to its period piece setting. It's a film in the MCU that crafts its own identity, even with all the flaws that it might still have today. Captain America: The First Avenger gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you liked this review. If you did like this review, look forward to more MCU reviews leading up to the release of Avengers: Infinity War. Next up will be the Avengers, the game changer that changed the entire superhero landscape, so look forward to that. So while you're anticipating that, don't forget to stay right here for your Mono Fix. Bye guys.